In 2023, Myanmar's Kokang Alliance Army has achieved a major victory since Operation 1027. In November, Myanmar's military junta publicly pledged to completely eradicate telecom fraud and gambling crimes in Myanmar by the end of 2023 during talks with the Chinese government. However, as of December 31, telecom fraud and gambling activities in Myanmar have not been completely eradicated. Telecom fraud in northern Myanmar has not been completely wiped out, and the Mayawati region in eastern Myanmar has not even begun operations. This means that the Burmese military junta, especially the government under Min Aung Hlaing, has lost trust with China. China has invested significant resources in bringing together Laos, Cambodia, Thailand and Myanmar to combat telecom fraud. China has twice hosted ceasefire talks between parties in northern Myanmar, but both times failed because of unrealistic demands from the Myanmar military. On December 29, China once again expressed its grave dissatisfaction with the deterioration of the situation in northern Myanmar and lodged a solemn protest with the relevant parties. China once again demands that all parties to the conflict in northern Myanmar immediately cease fire to ensure the safety of Chinese personnel and projects in Myanmar. In 2024, if the situation in northern Myanmar remains out of control, China will take tougher action. At present, the Allied forces are cleaning up Lao Cai and arresting and repatriating Chinese nationals involved in telecom fraud. On the Lao Cai front, there are still the last two Tatmadaw strongholds that have yet to be conquered. The Allied Army's goal was to fully restore the Kokang historical sphere of influence, which was much larger than the previous Kokang Special Zone, 2,700 square kilometers, which amounted to 20,000 square kilometers, including the county town of Lashio. It is said that at least 50% of the population there is of Han Chinese descent. The current goal of the Allied forces is to occupy the territory north of Lashio and establish a new autonomous region in Kokang. On the map, the Kokang region is bordered by the Wa state to the southeast and the Daang Liberation Army to the southwest, and they are currently allies. The successful restoration of the Kokang historical sphere of influence by the Allied forces will help the Daang Army to occupy the remaining areas of northern Shan state. This would put northern Myanmar under the control of four powerful ethnic forces, the Kachin Army, the Kokang Army, the Daang Army, and the Wa State Army, with an armed force of more than 100,000 people. This would make northern Myanmar less afraid of an attack by the Burmese army, and might even help China open up a direct outlet to the Indian Ocean. The current situation suggests that if the Burmese junta does not agree to the ceasefire agreement proposed by China, the four ethnic forces will continue to launch offensives and fight for more territory. The Burmese army tried to launch a counteroffensive, but was completely routed by the coalition forces, and now the four ethnic forces have pressed on the city of Lashio, forming a strategic encirclement. Next, they will engage in the decisive Battle of Lashio. It is worth mentioning that the Burmese army has a total of 12 main mobile divisions, and Min Aung Hlaing has mobilized at least 6 mobile divisions to northern Myanmar. The air and artillery units of the Burmese army are massing in the city of Lashio in northern Myanmar, and it is clear that they are also the best of the best. With a large-scale decisive battle looming in northern Myanmar, it is inevitable no matter what. Perhaps, only through this decisive battle can the grievances between the Burmese army and the ethnic armed forces be completely resolved, thus paving the way for the arrival of peace. China also feels helpless about the series of wars in northern Myanmar, because the Burmese army and ethnic armed forces are unwilling to admit defeat, and they are still ready to fight again. As a result, China can no longer exert direct pressure. Despite the Myanmar junta's poor performance, they are at least nominally government forces. The ethnic armed forces have helped China in the fight against telecom fraud, so China also has a responsibility to support them so as not to hurt their enthusiasm.